An oil tanker and a cargo ship have collided in the North Sea off the coast of East Yorkshire. This video sent to the BBC appears to show large clouds of smoke billowing from the oil tanker.
Fears are growing over a major environmental incident in the North Sea after an American oil tanker and a Portuguese cargo vessel carrying highly toxic cargo collided off the coast of East Yorkshire. Take a look at these. These pictures show a boat trying desperately to contain those flames from one of the vessels. You can see the thick black smoke billowing from both ships. Jet fuel is pouring into the North Sea from the oil tanker. The American tanker is the Stena Immaculate. The US military has confirmed it was on a short-term charter to US Military Sealift Command at the time of the collision. The container ship was carrying 15 containers of what's believed to be highly toxic sodium cyanide. Well, the coastguard are now assessing what pollution response might now be needed. Well, this footage of a radio message from about the crash was posted on social media. Have a listen.
So Long has collided with tanker Stena Immaculate in the outer anchorage. Both vessels are abandoning. Vessels who have firefighting equipment or who can assist with search and rescue, contact Humber Coastguard on channel 16. Vessel Stena Immaculate is carrying Jet A1 fuel, which is on fire and in the water.
Well, 36 people have been brought ashore after the crash. The local ambulance service confirmed no one had been taken to hospital, while the mariners from both crews are safe and accounted for. Well, the government says details on the cause of the collision are still becoming clear, with the Prime Minister's spokesman describing the crash as extremely concerning. Multiple agencies are now working on the rescue operation, and the Marine Accident Investigation Branch conducting a preliminary assessment and concerns about the environmental impact too. Well, Paddy Rogers is the former CEO of Euronav. It's a large tanker company. He says the workload facing the crew may have been a factor.
The biggest risk for a ship like the container ship is that she's on fast turnaround. She's doing across North Sea. I think she has been described as coming from Grangemouth and going to Rotterdam. So you can imagine the crew would have been very busy in port, discharging containers, loading new ones, and then would have a very short sea trip before entering another busy port. And this would be a very, very tiring business if you're doing it regularly. So you can imagine that their one period of respite might be when they actually get into deeper water and have a quieter time. And that's a point of could be a point of risk if somebody took a break when they shouldn't have done. And the human element is almost certainly at the centre of whatever happened here. The Stena Immaculate, I understand that she was at Agio Theodori, which is probably where she loaded the jet fuel, and was aiming or waiting now to get orders to come into port to discharge. I'm making that assumption. I don't know if that's true, but could be quickly clarified. The crew were probably in pretty good condition, were probably watching and were probably absolutely alarmed, but with very little they could do. They were at anchorage, their engine would not have been active. And it would have taken time for them to have reacted to what would have been a very strange turn of events, where a ship, as it approached, didn't take evasive action.
Well, the MP for Grimsby said these kinds of collisions are rare.
I think that there are around 34,000 crossings around the Humber on an annual basis. So that is not a small number of vessels, but most of the seafarers are very experienced, very knowledgeable. They understand, the sea currents and how the Humber works. It's a tidal estuary, so they have to wait for high tide to be able to come in and dock. So they're very familiar with that, and the processes generally are very good. So it's not that there won't have been. I'm sure there will have been near misses, but the Coast Guard is generally very good, as well as the other marine operators, in making sure that all vessels know where other vessels are at any given time, to avoid these sorts of occurrences. So it has come as some surprise to see that this has happened this morning. And it is thankfully rare, because we have heard some of the consequences of this collision as the news has started to come out today.
Well, that's the Grimsby MP. Let's speak now to Rowan Bridge, who is in Grimsby. And Rowan, bring us up to date with what we know is the very latest on this ongoing situation.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's very much an ongoing situation at the moment. The latest update from about half an hour ago was that the oil tanker was still on fire at that point. So I think clearly the emergency services will be focused on trying to bring those fires under control. And the other big concern, as you say, given that all of the crews on both vessels seem to have got off safely, the big concern now is what the potential environmental impact of this spill might be. As you say, we have heard that the oil tanker is spilling jet fuel into the sea, which is potentially dangerous to marine and wildlife in the area. And we know that the cargo vessel was carrying these 15 containers of sodium cyanide. Now, it's not clear whether those containers are still on the vessel, whether they've ended up in the water, whether they may have broken open or not. But if they have, they again pose a potential threat to marine life in the area. The RSPB say they're extremely concerned about the situation. It's not clear exactly what that is at the moment. And the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust have also expressed their concerns, saying that this could be potentially devastating for wildlife in the area. The coastguard say they are assessing the situation, but I think it's really going to depend on how much of this fuel, for example, burns off, how much of it ends up staying in the environment, how much the choppy the waters are, and how much that is able to disperse it. And all of that really is a bit of an open question at the moment. The other thing we have now is obviously an investigation into how this was able to happen. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch already have their investigators down here at the scene, and I'm sure they will be speaking to the crew of both vessels, given that all those people on board seem to have escaped pretty much unharmed.
Container ship was carrying a consignment of sodium cyanide and the oil tanker a cargo of military jet fuel. So what could this mean for the environment? Our science correspondent Martin Stew is here. I mean, it doesn't sound good, does it, Martin? What are the main concerns?
Yeah, not great, Mary. Let's start by just looking one more time at exactly where that collision happened. So just 10 miles off the coast near the border between Lincolnshire and Yorkshire. Beautiful stretch of coastline for any that know it, but it's also of huge ecological value. To the north, we have the protected areas of Flamborough and the nature reserve of Bempton Cliff. Now, they are internationally vital breeding grounds for seabirds, including everyone's favourite, the puffin. The wind is, though, currently blowing from the northeast, so it may well be areas down to the south and west which are more at risk, including the Humber Estuary itself, a designated area of special scientific interest. That includes Spurn, a peninsula of mudflats and marshes where seagrass replanting project has just been carried out. And if we go back in history, we can see that previous oil spills like the Torrey Canyon in 1967 were absolutely devastating. It's estimated 15,000 seabirds were killed as a result of this spill. But then it was crude oil. This time with a Stena Immaculate, by comparison, it is carrying 130,000 barrels of jet fuel. That is much more flammable, hence the flames, but potentially experts say not as damaging.
It's a lucky thing that it's jet fuel and not crude oil. Jet fuel contains many toxic chemicals, hundreds of toxic chemicals, but they're not persistent. So the impact will be relatively short-lived, particularly as the spill happened in the open sea.
Now, but that doesn't account for the heavy fuel powering the two ships themselves. Plus, we've learnt the cargo ship was carrying 15 containers full of sodium cyanide, which can release poisonous hydrogen cyanide gas. Mary, getting this clean-up right and getting it done quickly is going to be hugely important.
OK, Martin Stew, thank you.